Great, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. So I've been asked to talk about other multi-stakeholder initiatives and to try to provide a bit of context for where RSPO sits in that. And what I want to do is just to start off by reminding us what multi-stakeholder initiatives are and why they're important, because I think sometimes when you're in the middle of being a multi-stakeholder initiative, it's good just to step back and think about that. So, at least for me, I think multi-stakeholder initiatives have two really defining attributes. First of all, they're inclusive, so both the governance and the technical development involves representation from all the different relevant groups. And secondly, they are balanced, that there are systems for making sure that everybody has a say and nobody dominates. So that's probably fairly familiar for most people. A question that I still get asked very often is why they matter. Why are multi-stakeholder processes, which, as we all know, are complicated and time-consuming and hard work, why do they matter? Well, sustainable natural resource management and use is very complex. It requires balancing social, environmental, and economic aspects. We all agree on that, but there's still, even after 20 years since the Rio conference where people really first started talking about that, there's still no generally agreed definition of what exactly that means in practice. And so we need to develop them all of the time whenever we want to use them, and multi-stakeholder processes have played a really crucial role. And there are two areas where I think they're really important, and I think it's worth reminding ourselves of that, and particularly perhaps now as we face ahead of us the revision of the P&C and everything that will go with trying to revise a set of P&C through a multi-stakeholder process. But first of all, in technical discussions, there are many people in the standards world who talk about standards just being technical, but you can't make purely technical decisions about sustainability because we're often talking about compromises between competing aspects. There's no absolute right and wrong. A lot of it is societal decisions about how we balance things. You can't do that just with a technical group. You need to have people that represent different viewpoints in order to come up with the right balance and the right answer. And secondly, in many cases, and oil palm is no exception, there's lots of missing information. So we're often working with best guesses. And we need to have a range of different views on what's appropriate for that. So from a technical point of view, I think it's good to remind ourselves that it is really crucial to have a multi-stakeholder process, and technical groups don't fill exactly the same role. It's also very important for governance. It's not enough just to involve people in the technical bit. The governance matters too, because the governance controls the way that the whole process works. But it's also very important in building trust and collaboration. And that doesn't always work perfectly. I think every roundtable I've ever been to, and I've been to all but 2 of them, there's always some argument between people, there's always some issue that we have to deal with. But yet we all keep coming back and we all keep working together. And at national levels around the world, multi-stakeholder processes help bring together different groups to find common ways forward. So they really matter. So just in summary, when you look at different initiatives, there is a continuum, if you like, from single interest right through to multi-stakeholder processes, and they are not the same, they differ. So around the world, there are lots and lots of different initiatives and lots of multi-stakeholder initiatives too. I'm not going to talk about all of them, and lots of you are involved in many of them and can give more information, but just a few of the other things that are around to give a flavour for those of you who've been much more involved in RSPO. There is a roundtable on responsible soy, which is particularly active in South America. Bon Sucro, which is a sugarcane roundtable. There is roundtable for cotton. There's the FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, which has been around for a long time. There are lots and lots of different roundtables. There's also multi-stakeholder initiatives for different things. And if you look, there's also a number of more single interest initiatives. Things like SA 8000, which many of you will be familiar with, which looks at workers' rights. Fair trade, which is increasingly widely used. In the Amazon, there is a moratorium on deforestation from the soy industry that focuses on a specific issue. And there's also sector approaches which are not multi-stakeholder processes, but many of you will be familiar with. Global Gap is very widely used for agriculture. ISCC has been used recently for the biofuels market. And if we look at those, then first of all, looking at the initiative governance, if you look at that range from a single interest through to multi-stakeholder, the RSPO is really a multi-stakeholder initiative and sits there with others like the RTRS, which have the same kind of governance structures and balanced involvement. The single issue, things like fair trade, tend to involve people who are interested particularly in fair trade for obvious reasons, while many of the other schemes are much more single interest schemes. It's interesting to look at when the schemes appeared and where RSPO fits into that. There was a whole flurry of kind of developing these schemes in the 1990s, and then there was a bit of a break, and then RSPO appeared in around 2004, and all of the other agricultural schemes have kind of come afterwards. But RSPO was a little bit ahead, and I think it's, in my experience, certainly with the ones I work with, however many problems we may feel we have, I think RSPO has managed to maintain that edge of being a bit ahead of everyone else. In general, if you look across all of the different schemes, they are delivering fairly similar things, although not identical. Production requirements, and more those production requirements tend to cover the same range of issues. So anyone who is familiar with RSPO, if they pick up the RTRS requirements or the Bonsucro requirements, they're going to see lots of things there that look very familiar. The wording may be different, the order may be different, but the kind of issues and the kind of requirements are similar. All of them have supply chain requirements, and more of us are thinking it would be very convenient not to have to do separate supply chain for all of the different things that exist. Many have optional additions, EU Red, GM Free, those kind of things that, again, we're familiar with the EU Red add-on idea for RSPO. All of them have or many of them have certification and accreditation. And now more and more are looking at support for producers, particularly small producers, and training. So there's lots going on, and there's beginning to be more and more people discussing how we can bring learning from one set of roundtable experiences into others, because there's lots of overlap. And many companies are involved in more than one. Many buyers are involved in more than one. Many NGOs are involved in more than one. And so there's lots of scope for learning and across the different roundtables. If you look at the current status, and other people might perhaps argue slightly with this, but I think really what you see is there is a bunch of initiatives that have been around for a long time. The FSC, Fair Trade, they've been around for a long time. They've already gone through a big learning process, and they're well established. And then you have a bunch that are kind of incipient, and I think RSPO sits in between those two. We are ahead of many of the other newer roundtables, but we are still in a position that we could learn some things from some of the older established ones. I think actually we could teach some of the old established ones some things as well. But I think that the RSPO has made phenomenal progress and is in fact seen as a model by lots of other roundtables, that people are increasingly interested to know how does it work and how do things get done. And it has a lot to teach the other roundtables. So if I look across all the roundtables that I work with or Proforest works with, and we work with I guess 10 or 12 of them at least, what does the future hold? There's growing experience now of what works and what doesn't. And though I think it's really important that people go through a process of learning for themselves, I also think that we can learn from what's already happened. The increased coverage and credibility of all of these schemes means that they are being seen more and more by big brands, by governments, as a proxy for good practice, and I think they are going to get used much more. There is an increasing focus on their possible link to RED, which we will hear about a bit more later on. And also all of them really are facing the same challenges, and those we have to focus on. A much stronger focus on the consumption end, better inclusion of small producers, and dealing with multiple schemes, and how do we deal with the issues of expanding numbers of schemes. So hopefully that gives you a very brief overview of where RSPO sits in relation to multi-stakeholder processes, and Darryl will now talk a bit more about RSPO in detail. Thank you.